Hey, how you doing? It's your buddy Brian. I should say right now, if you just want to get to the riding, go to that timestamp. If you want to know where I've been for 2 months, why I haven't had a video out for a little while, and why I am headed to the Pine Creek Rail Trail right now, then stick around. I'll be brief. Nah, I won't be brief. You know I'm not brief. I won't be offended if you want to skip ahead, but about 2 months ago, I went down to Florida. I had an epic, adventurous ride. It was fantastic. 8 days traveling down the east coast of Florida. I started almost up at the Georgia border and ended in Miami Beach 8 days later. And it was fantastic. As of right now, I'm working on the video. I don't know if I'm going to get it done before this one. If I do get it done before this one, there it is. There's the thumbnail. And if I just did that and nothing appeared on the screen, then I didn't finish the video. I did this one first. Anyways, fantastic. Some weather challenges. I had some bike failures. I met some great people. It was fun. It was everything that an adventure should be. And then I came home. And look, sometimes life comes at you, you know, fast, furious. Well, the first thing that happened was very sad, but my mother passed away. And, well, it was sad because she was 4 years battling with dementia. Terrible thing to see a loved one go through. And yet I'm incredibly grateful to the friends that were there through that time to support me, and the people that took care of my mother in the memory facility that she lived at for 4 years were nothing short of just angelic. And I am immensely grateful to my oldest brother, who is a fine, fine person. He is a hell of a guy. I'm grateful he's my brother. He took care of her affairs and looked after her as, well, few people could. You know, he's the kind of guy, when stuff needs to be done, he does it. I admire him. He's a good man. A week before that, I started developing some really bizarro eye issues. And I don't want to get into all the details because, well, quite frankly, I still don't know what's wrong. It could be something explained as simply as I'm getting older. You know, I'm in denial. I still think I'm like 30, and I'm not. And I guess I should be more thankful that I've been fairly healthy my whole life, really. And then just in recent years, I've had some funky things. But anyway, I started experiencing some eye issues. I went to my ophthalmologist, who is a cyclist and a good guy. I told him about this channel. If you're watching this video, you are a rock star. I appreciate your care immensely. Anyway, he looked at my eyes and said, yep, you got some stuff going on. Let's be cautious. I'd like you to take between 1 and 2 months off. And I said, off? What does off mean? What does that mean to you? And he's like, yeah, no cardio, no weightlifting, and I want you to reduce your eye strain, the number one source of which is screen time. Okay, those three things make up about 95% of my life. I'm either riding, or when I'm at home, I might be running. I work out 4 or 5 days a week. And as you may know, I make YouTube videos. So, and when I'm not making YouTube videos, I'm watching YouTube videos. So, to tell me to stop that, I mean, if he would have said no laughing or coffee, I mean, that would have been like, I don't know, 99% of my life. But as he phrased it, would you rather push it and go for a bike ride, or would you rather be able to see? I said, when you put it that way, okay, I think I'd rather see. So we got to the month point, and he looked at my eyes and he said, yeah, they're healing. So I guess it's, you know, eyes to me seem like they just heal slowly. So they're getting better. So he said, give it a few more weeks. That's a month and a half. And then slowly get back to the things that you love to do. And he's like, but you're not one of those guys that goes out and, you know, does 300-mile rides, you know. And I'm like, yeah, I am. And he's like, well, don't do that. So anyway, I had to cancel some things. I was going to go back to Florida and ride with my buddy Kevin. I'm sorry, Kevin, to leave you hanging. And I canceled my trip out to Utah to go ride the White Rim Trail. But I had to do it. Well, month and a half was last week. And what's the net effect of a month and a half of sitting around doing nothing? Well, I went for a little jog. I jogged 2 miles, and you would have thought I did a marathon. And that's partially because there is, well, let's be charitable, 15 more pounds of Brian. Yeah, you know, that happens. But again, what's the choice? There is no choice. So I was getting stir crazy. I decided that I would drive up to the beautiful Pine Creek Rail Trail, the Pennsylvania Gorge, the Grand Canyon of the East, and just do a couple days of gentle riding and see how my body and specifically my eyes react. So spoiler alert, if you're watching this video, things went well. If they don't go well, I'm not going to put out a video. All right, that's all the news that's fit to print. I'll see you when we start riding. What a beautiful spring day. Wow. It's still kind of down in the mid 50s. So I'm being a cold wimp, wearing a sweatshirt. You know, I don't care what weather it is today. It could be a torrential downpour. And I am going to be smiling from ear to ear because it feels so good to be on the bike. You know, it's the old cliche. Sometimes you don't appreciate what you have until you don't have it, or something like that. The idea that I might not be able to cycle. Wow, that was a lot to hold on to for a month and a half. How you doing? It's all our trail today. Nobody else is out here. It's all us. Those are the only two other cyclists I've seen all day. It is Tuesday, so you know. About 30 miles in and almost at the north end of the trail. There's a market up here. I hope it's open because I want to get some lunch before heading back. If I understand it correctly, they're going to connect the trail with the town of Wellsboro, which will be very cool because that will open up all sorts of things for restaurants and places to stay and all that good stuff. This on the way up. That was awesome. The owner of the house came out and we talked for a little bit. He put that up last year. Good for him. Well, our country and the world could use a lot of prayer. Signs of spring. Hey, buddy, don't be scared. How you doing? All right, hey, I wanted to end this video with a story. I think it's a funny story. It is a tribute to my mother. And some of you may think it's dark humor. I don't like that term. I think the ability to laugh through tough times, I don't think that's a bad thing. Dementia's not funny, okay? I'm not making fun of dementia, and I'm not making fun of my mom struggling through dementia. But, you know, there are things that happen in the context of dementia that are funny. And I guarantee you that if my mother were of sound mind and heard this story, she would laugh the hardest. So, a couple years ago, I went to go take her out to dinner. And she lived in a memory care facility. And I got to her room, and there were two women visiting with her, which was not uncommon. Many times you'd be sitting talking. I'd be sitting talking with my mother, and somebody would just walk in and sit down, and then they'd leave. And I'd say, "Who was that?" And my mom would say, "I don't know." It was just not uncommon. People would just be friendly and sit and talk. So, well, anyway, nice people. And we got around to dinner time, and I realized they're not leaving. So I went out to the front desk, and I got a hold of one of the managers, and I said, "Hey, can I take these two ladies?" I knew their names. I said, "Can I take them out to dinner with my mom?" And they looked, and yeah, they had permission to leave. You had to sign them out, and I don't know. We were only going a couple miles away from the facility. We went out to dinner. We had a great time. One of the things with dementia is that people start living in the context of years ago. So, these were like basically teenage girls out to dinner, which was delightful. It was just fun. But during dinner, I asked one of the women where she was from, and she said, "I come from a little town called Massillon, Ohio." And I said, Massillon, I just rode through Massillon on a bike trip. And she was like, what are you talking about? And I thought, what the heck? Pulled out my phone, pulled up the YouTube video, fast forwarded to the Ohio to Erie Trail as it goes through Massillon. I handed it to her, and she said, oh, I know exactly where this is. That's Main Street, and oh, that's the park, and yeah, and I didn't know there was a bike trail there. Well, fantastic. And you made a video about it. Well, that's wonderful. The next day I went back to the facility, and they're all they're in an activity. They're in the activity room, and they were finishing up a game, and they were going to watch a Disney movie or something. They watched a lot of Disney movies. And all of a sudden, Massillon woman looks at the director and says, this guy over here, he makes videos about bicycling. You got to show one of his videos. And I'm sort of like, oh no. Well, the director walks over and says, what's the story? I don't understand. And I said, yeah, I got a YouTube channel and I make bike touring videos. And she said, why do you want to show one of them? And if you ask some questions, I don't know. We love to have guest speakers. And I'm like, wow, that's sort of a stretch. Guest speaker, okay. But okay, sure. So I stood up, I queued up the video. I said, I'm Brian, I'm Sue's son. Which she sat up all proper because, my mom was a trip. So anyway, I said, this is a trip from Cleveland to Cincinnati. I'll show it and answer some questions later. I told the director, listen, this is a 3.5-hour video. And she says, oh, we normally do 10 minutes and then do something else. And I was like, okay, good. So I let it play, and sure enough, about 10 minutes in, you could see, we're done. We've had enough. We've had enough cycling. So I turned it off, and I stood up, and I said, are there any questions? And there wasn't. People were just smiling, and then somebody clapped, and then, okay, it was all over. Well, my mom jumps up and takes off. And I thought, that's weird. And before I could follow her, two guys came up, and they were a little younger. They were in their late, I want to say maybe early 70s. And they were cyclists, and they wanted to know more about the Ohio to Erie Trail. And so I talked with them for a while, and then I went to look for my mom. And as I'm walking down the hallway, she had a very distinctive laugh, and I could hear her laughing in her room. So I get to her room, open the door. She and another woman are sitting there, and they're laughing. And my mom had tears rolling down her face. She was laughing so hard. And she had forgotten I had visited, so she was excited that I came. And I said, Mom, what are you laughing about? I could hear you halfway down the hall. And she said, we just had the most ridiculous presentation. There was a guy who rides his bike and makes videos. And it was the most boring thing I have ever seen. Oh, gosh. So I started laughing with her. She's still laughing. And I was like, well, Mom, come on, to each his own. That's what this guy likes to do. So, okay, about a month later, I go back. And, of course, she says, what have you been doing? What you been doing lately? And I said, I've been riding my bike. And she says, riding your bike? What do you mean? I said, I was down in Florida. And, went on a long ride. And she's like, did you take any pictures? And I said, Mom, I'll do one better. I made a video about it. And she's like, what? What are you talking about? Can I see it? And I was like, of course you can see it. So I pulled it up, and I think it was a little over an hour, and she sat there just totally engaged, watching this. And I tried to talk, and she'd be like, no. She'd just watch. And she's like, this is fantastic. You did this? You went on this ride? That is wonderful. What a great adventure. That's fantastic. So, look, when I need a boost in life, I'll remember one of those stories. When I need a dose of humility, I'll remember the other one. she had a great sense of humor. I miss it already. And, well, rest in peace, Mom.